It rarely happens in front of others. There's no standing ovation. No confetti falls from the sky. It doesn't come with applause. It usually happens alone, maybe in the middle of the night, maybe after the 10th time you've tolerated someone who should have been cut out of your life long ago. It comes after the damage, after the betrayals, after you've tried too hard for people who never gave you even half in return. We've all been taught to defend ourselves from what's outside: people, situations, words, even opinions. But most people never realize the greatest threat to our peace doesn't begin out there. It begins in here. It begins in the mind that allows disrespect because it craves approval. It begins in the nervous system that's addicted to familiar chaos. It begins in the part of us that feels safer tolerating pain than risking the unknown. Before you ever put up a boundary with someone else, you have to build one inside yourself. And for many people, that's the most terrifying part, because it means taking full responsibility for the patterns you've allowed, the silence you've chosen, and the peace you've traded away just to keep people close. That's not an attack on you. It's an invitation to understand yourself more deeply. Let's break this down from both a psychological and neurological perspective. Boundaries are not walls, they're filters. They don't shut the world out, they determine what gets in and what stays out. They are an act of emotional intelligence, not aggression. But if you don't believe you're worth protecting, no external boundary will ever hold. This belief, or lack of it, comes from early life conditioning. If you grew up in an environment where your worth was tied to performance, compliance, or emotional labor, then saying no now can feel like betrayal. You internalized the message that being loved meant being needed, that keeping peace meant keeping quiet, that being strong meant never having needs. So now, as an adult, when someone disrespects you, manipulates you, or drains your energy, you second guess your instincts. You don't trust your right to leave, to draw a line, to speak up. Instead, you hesitate. You rationalize. You stay. Why? Because your nervous system equates that treatment with home. That's the first step to reclaiming your life, realizing that what feels normal is not necessarily healthy. It's just familiar. The brain is a prediction machine. It constantly tries to anticipate what's coming based on past experiences. That's how it conserves energy. So if your past is filled with conditional love or emotional chaos, your brain has wired itself to expect and accept those same dynamics. It's not self-sabotage, it's neurological conditioning. But here's the good news: neuroplasticity tells us that the brain can change. You can rewire your expectations. You can teach your body that peace is not boring, that love is not earned through pain, and that safety doesn't come from silence. That shift begins with the inner boundary. An inner boundary is the decision you make about who you are and what you are no longer available for, regardless of what the world demands. It's the moment you say, even if they don't like it, I will not abandon myself again. And that changes everything. When you build this boundary, you stop negotiating with people who benefit from your confusion. You stop over-explaining to those who never listen. You stop shrinking so someone else can feel big. You stop giving access to people who have proven they don't know what to do with your energy. You begin to respond instead of react. That's critical. When someone crosses your boundary and you react from a place of fear or guilt, they still control the frame. But when you've done the inner work, when you know who you are, what you will accept, and what you will walk away from, you don't react, you respond thoughtfully, firmly, calmly, and with no need for validation. This isn't arrogance, it's alignment. Because what most people don't realize is that your boundaries aren't for them, they're for you. They're not punishments, they're protection. And when they're rooted in love, for yourself, for your peace, for your purpose, they don't come with drama or rage. They come with clarity. You'll know your inner boundary is strong when you no longer feel the need to prove your worth in the conversation. When you no longer try to convince someone to treat you right. When you can walk away, not with bitterness, but with certainty. That kind of certainty doesn't happen overnight. It's built through small, repeated acts of self-respect. Every time you say no when your body screams yes out of fear, you strengthen that boundary. Every time you take a breath before texting back someone who triggers your anxiety, you reinforce it. Every time you leave a conversation, a job, or a relationship that dishonors your spirit, you lay another brick. This is how you become emotionally sovereign. You stop looking to others to define what's acceptable. You stop outsourcing your self-esteem. You take back the pen and rewrite your internal rules. And I want to be honest with you, it will be uncomfortable, especially at first, because boundaries don't just shift your behavior, They threaten the status quo. The people who once fed off your people, pleasing will push back. The ones who manipulated you will accuse you of changing. And they're right. You are changing. You're healing. You're no longer accepting crumbs when you deserve a feast. You're no longer apologizing for existing. You're no longer staying small to make someone else feel tall. And while it may feel lonely at first, that loneliness is sacred. That's the space where you build your new identity. That's where you learn to regulate your own emotions, calm your own nervous system, and trust your own decisions. That's where you become whole, so the next time someone tries to define your worth, you'll realize they're not qualified. That's when toxic people start to lose interest. Not because you put them in their place, but because you left theirs. You outgrew the dynamic. You stopped playing the role. You removed your energy from the cycle, and when you do that, the cycle dies. This is the power of the inner boundary. It's not loud. It doesn't come with a speech or a declaration. It doesn't need to be announced on social media. It's quiet. It's sacred. It's the shift that happens in your heart when you decide that your peace is more important than their permission. And when that shift is real, when it's rooted and practiced and honored, your outer boundaries will finally hold, because they're no longer just rules. They're reflections of who you've become. Unshakable. Clear. Untouchable. And that's when toxic people stop bothering you, not because they've changed, but because you did. And you'll never go back. There's something powerful about a person who doesn't flinch when provoked. A person who doesn't react when insulted, doesn't explain when misunderstood, and doesn't chase when ignored. That kind of presence, it shakes people. Because we live in a world that feeds on reaction, on noise, on emotional chaos. So when you choose silence, you become an anomaly. And in that stillness, you find your greatest strength. Silence is not passive. It's not surrender. It's not a lack of words. It's the presence of self-control. It's the deep internal knowing that you no longer owe everyone access to your energy. It's discipline in motion. And for people used to pulling you into emotional storms, your silence is a power they can't penetrate. Toxic people feed on your response. They rely on it. Your anger, your defensiveness, your explanations, those are fuel. To them, it doesn't matter whether you scream or cry or try to reason. What matters is that they still have the power to make you feel. Because as long as they can make you feel, they believe they still control you. But when you go silent, not with bitterness, but with clarity, you send a message louder than words ever could. You no longer live here. And make no mistake, this kind of silence isn't easy. It's not the same as shutting down. It's not avoidance. It's a conscious choice, a reprogramming of your nervous system, because biologically, we're wired to react. The amygdala, the brain's fear center, lights up when we're threatened, even emotionally. It wants you to do something: fight, run, explain, justify. But the moment you pause, breathe, and refuse to play the game, the amygdala loses its grip. And the prefrontal cortex, the seat of reason, logic, and higher thinking, takes over. That is emotional mastery. Not because you're numb, but because you're wise. Because you've finally learned that your peace is worth protecting. That your energy is not public property. That not every comment deserves a comeback. Not every insult requires a defense. And not every attack is worth acknowledging. The most powerful people I've met aren't the loudest in the room. They're the ones who have nothing to prove. The ones who know exactly who they are, and therefore don't need to convince anyone else. They use their silence like a sword, not to harm, but to hold space, to create distance, to end cycles without shouting. Think of it like a fire. When someone is trying to burn you with their drama, their chaos, their manipulation, every time you respond emotionally, you're throwing wood on their fire. But when you go silent, when you walk away, when you disengage completely, you take the oxygen out of the room. And without oxygen, even the hottest fire dies. But here's the part no one talks about: how painful that silence can feel in the beginning. Because when you're used to proving yourself, defending your truth, or fixing things, silence feels like failure. It feels like you're losing control, like you're giving up. But what you're actually doing is reclaiming your dignity. You're stepping out of a cycle that was never going to end. You're refusing to be baited. You're allowing your calm to speak where your words are no longer respected. And people will notice. They'll try harder at first. They'll push more buttons. They'll accuse you of being cold or heartless or changed. And they're right. You have changed. You've evolved past the need to entertain dysfunction. You've upgraded your standards. You've realized that maturity means choosing peace over being right. Because silence doesn't mean you don't care. It means you've started caring about the right things: your growth, your healing, your sanity, your future. Let them wonder what you're thinking. Let them feel the absence of your reaction. Let them face the echo of their own behavior without your voice covering it up. That silence, that space, that void they feel when you stop responding. That's where their reflection lives. And sometimes that's the only thing that can wake a person up, the mirror of your non-reaction. But even if it doesn't wake them up, it will protect you, because silence is not about changing them. It's about preserving you. It's about teaching your nervous system that calm is your home. It's about refusing to let someone else's dysfunction dictate your emotional state. So the next time you're baited, insulted, provoked, don't match their energy. Don't mirror their chaos. Don't break your peace just to win a moment. Hold your silence, not from fear, but from power. The kind of power that no one can take away because it was never given by them to begin with. And in that silence, you'll find something you've been missing for a long time: yourself. Untouchable, unshaken, unbothered, not because you didn't have anything to say, but because you finally realized you didn't need to say it. There's a difference between shutting down and rising up, and emotional detachment, when rooted in awareness, not avoidance, is one of the greatest acts of self-mastery you will ever learn. It's not about becoming cold. It's about becoming clear. It's not about apathy. It's about alignment. The world will try to convince you that caring less makes you heartless. But the truth is, detachment doesn't mean you don't care. It means you finally learned what to care about. Most people don't realize this, but toxic people aren't just manipulative. They're emotional parasites. They feed off of your guilt, your kindness, your empathy. They don't just want your time, they want your mind. They want to live rent-free inside your thoughts. They want you to obsess, to explain, to wonder. That's their grip: emotional chaos. And as long as you're emotionally entangled, they know they still have a hold on you. But emotional detachment breaks the cycle, not by pushing people away, but by stepping back into your own clarity, by no longer confusing every action with connection, by understanding that someone else's behavior isn't always your responsibility to fix, carry, or interpret. This detachment doesn't make you a bad person. It makes you a free one. Let's look at this from the lens of neuroscience. When you're emotionally reactive, especially in toxic dynamics, your brain is hijacked by the limbic system, specifically the amygdala. That's the part of your brain responsible for processing threats. It triggers the fight, flight, or freeze response. So when someone says something triggering, manipulative, or cruel, your brain sounds the alarm. Your heart races, your body tenses, and your mind becomes fixated on responding. This is where most people lose themselves. They lash out, they over-explain, they plead. They try to make it make sense. But the truth is, if someone is committed to misunderstanding you, no amount of explaining will reach them. The more energy you give to defending yourself, the more power you give away. Emotional detachment interrupts this pattern. It activates the prefrontal cortex, the rational, calm, decision-making part of your brain. It gives you the pause between stimulus and response. It's the moment you say, I see what's happening here, and I don't need to be part of it. When you detach, you're not denying your emotions, you're directing them. You're choosing when, where, and how they show up. You stop being a puppet pulled by every emotional string someone else tugs on. Think of it like standing in the middle of a storm. You can either be blown around by every gust of wind, or you can anchor yourself so deeply that even the storm can't move you. Emotional detachment is that anchor. You stop answering questions meant to bait you. You stop attending every argument you're invited to. You stop justifying your peace to people who are allergic to it. Instead, you observe. You see clearly. You listen deeply, but you choose not to absorb. You watch their patterns instead of reacting to their performance. You notice their manipulations without needing to retaliate. You hear their insults without letting them define you. And slowly, something incredible happens. Your energy returns. Your mind quiets. Your body softens. You begin to feel safe in your own presence again. The tug of war ends because you've put the rope down. This doesn't mean you never feel anything. On the contrary, you feel more. But you choose to feel responsibly. You recognize your triggers without letting them control your behavior. You acknowledge all your emotions without needing them to justify a reaction. That's real power. And yes, people will accuse you of being distant, disconnected, or uncaring, especially those who benefited from your emotional availability. But let them talk. They're not upset because you're cold. They're upset because they can no longer manipulate your warmth, because you're no longer overextending for people who refuse to meet you halfway. You're no longer emotionally bankrupting yourself to keep someone else comfortable. You're no longer confusing access with intimacy. You're protecting your peace without apology. That's what mastery looks like. And when you get there, when you've truly detached from the drama, the guilt, the performance, you'll find a kind of peace that no one can touch, a clarity that doesn't need to be shouted, a power that speaks for itself. You'll become unshakable not because life got easier, but because you stopped leaking your energy into places it didn't belong. That's emotional detachment, not cruelty, not coldness, not arrogance, just mastery. At the heart of every toxic cycle you stay stuck in is a hidden wound, a wound that once whispered, "If I can just be enough, maybe they'll finally love me right." That's the part of you that needs healing. The part that thought you had to earn your worth. The part that didn't get what it needed when you were most impressionable. The part that confused attention with affection and silence with safety. And until that part of you is healed, toxic people will always have an invisible hook in your heart. Validation is a powerful human need. From infancy, we learn who we are through the mirror of others. A parent's smile tells a child, "You matter." A caregiver's response says, "Your feelings are real." But when that mirror is cracked, when the people meant to nurture you invalidate your pain, ignore your voice, or love you conditionally, you grow up searching for the reflection you never got. You start looking for proof of your worth in other people's eyes. And that's where toxic patterns begin. You overextend. You people please. You accept less than you deserve. Not because you're weak, but because deep down, you're still trying to rewrite the past. You're still trying to turn rejection into approval. You're still trying to get someone, anyone, to give you the validation that should have been yours all along. That's not your fault. It's survival. Your brain adapted to the emotional environment it was given. In neuroscience, this is called emotional imprinting. Your early experiences carved deep grooves into your neural pathways, teaching you what to expect from relationships. If love was inconsistent, you learned to chase it. If your needs were ignored, you learned to silence them. If validation was earned only through performance, you learned to perform. And for a while, it worked. You kept the peace. You avoided abandonment. You got by. But at what cost? Every time you prioritized someone else's approval over your own truth, you betrayed yourself. Every time you stayed quiet to avoid conflict, you taught yourself that your voice didn't matter. Every time you tolerated disrespect, you reinforced the belief that love must be earned through suffering. But here's the truth. You don't need their validation anymore. Not your parents. Not your exes. Not your bosses. Not your friends. Not anyone's. Because the love you were looking for was never meant to come from them. It was meant to come from you. Healing doesn't mean pretending you were never hurt. It means turning toward the wound with compassion instead of shame. It means sitting with that younger version of yourself and saying, "I'm sorry you weren't protected. I'm sorry they didn't see you. I'm sorry you had to shrink just to survive. But I see you now. I hear you. And I'm here to give you what they never could." And that's when things start to shift. Because when you stop outsourcing your worth, you stop tolerating anything less than you deserve. You stop seeking closure from people who were never open to begin with. You stop trying to explain your value to those committed to misunderstanding you. You stop begging people to stay who were never meant to be permanent. You become your own mirror. And that reflection, it's clean, it's grounded, it's whole. It's not based on someone else's reaction. It's not shaped by temporary approval. It's based on truth, the truth that you were always enough. That their inability to love you wasn't evidence of your unworthiness. It was evidence of their own unhealed pain. When you finally realize this, when it drops from your head into your heart, you stop feeling drawn to the same toxic dynamics, not because they don't still exist, but because you no longer need them. That old craving for validation is gone. You've met it, you've held it, and you've healed it. Healing is not a straight line. You'll still get triggered. You'll still want to be chosen, praised, seen. That's human. But now you'll have the awareness to pause, to breathe, to check in with yourself and ask, do I need this from them, or am I forgetting that I already have it within me? That's the difference. That's freedom. And when you walk through life from that place, validated from within, you become unshakable. You don't chase people. You don't force connections. You don't tolerate crumbs because you're not operating from a place of emptiness anymore. You're operating from fullness. And from that place, toxic people can't reach you. Not because you've become cruel, but because you've become whole. That's the healing that changes everything. There's a kind of strength that doesn't make noise. It doesn't argue. It doesn't fight for attention. It doesn't chase closure, validation, or applause. It just moves, quietly, powerfully, and with unwavering direction. That's the kind of strength that is born the moment you become fully rooted in your purpose. Because when you're anchored in why you're here, what you're building, who you're becoming, nothing can distract you. Not toxic people, not petty drama, not the noise of those who don't understand your mission. They simply fade into the background. Their distractions die in your shadow. Purpose is not just about big goals or grand achievements. It's about alignment. It's about clarity. It's about waking up and knowing this is what matters today, and everything else is noise. When you live like that, you stop giving power to people who don't even know what they stand for. You stop getting pulled into meaningless battles. You stop allowing the opinions of people going nowhere to derail the direction of your life. Here's the truth: toxic people don't just want your attention. They want your direction. They want to take you off course. Not always because they're malicious, but because your clarity threatens them. Your peace reminds them of their chaos. Your discipline exposes their laziness. Your self-respect reflects what they haven't yet developed. So they distract, they provoke. They create tension where there was none. And if you're not grounded in something bigger than them, you'll fall for it every time. But when you're rooted, really rooted, in your purpose, you become immovable. Not hardened, not closed, just focused. You begin to ask better questions. Is this helping me grow? Is this moving me forward? Is this aligned with who I'm becoming? And if the answer is no, you don't entertain it, not out of ego, out of clarity. There's a neuroscience principle behind this. When you are purpose-driven, your brain engages the dopaminergic reward system. That means you start releasing feel-good chemicals, not from meaningless validation, but from meaningful progress. You begin to feel good not from scrolling, reacting, or arguing, but from building, from showing up, from doing the thing you said you would do. That's real power. That's internal fire. And here's what's incredible. Once that fire is lit, distractions lose their appeal. You stop caring who said, "What about you?" You stop needing to be liked by people who don't even like themselves. You stop feeling the urge to prove, defend, or compete because you realize I'm not here for them. I'm here for this, for my mission, for my healing, for my legacy. Legacy doesn't begin with applause. It begins with discipline. It begins with waking up one more day and doing what matters even when no one's watching, especially when no one's watching. And that discipline, that rhythm, that consistency, it becomes your armor. You become so locked in, so internally validated, that even the loudest distraction sounds like a whisper. And it doesn't mean life gets easy. It just means you no longer fall apart every time it gets hard. Because purpose gives you perspective. It turns pain into fuel. It turns criticism into refinement. It turns setbacks into course corrections. When you know why you're here, you don't crumble, you adapt. This is the transformation. You go from reactive to responsive, from distracted to devoted, from scattered to surgical. And toxic people, they don't know what to do with someone like that. Someone they can't provoke, someone who doesn't flinch, someone who looks them in the eye and simply doesn't move. That's what purpose does. It makes you calm in the storm, focused in the noise, deeply present in a world obsessed with superficiality. So the real work, the deepest, most life-changing work, is not trying to fix the distractions. It's becoming so focused, so steady, that the distractions no longer affect you. They don't disappear. You just rise above them. You become bigger than the nonsense. You move from needing to manage the chaos to simply outgrowing it. And that's when everything changes. Your relationships change. Your habits change. Your standards change. You stop wasting energy on people who never had the capacity to walk with you. You stop trying to drag dead weight into a future they weren't built for. You stop watering gardens that were never yours to tend. You just rise. That's the power of purpose. It doesn't just give you something to chase. It gives you something to stand on, a foundation, a compass, a filter for everything you allow into your world. And when that purpose is real, when it lives in your bones, you won't need to announce your growth. You won't need to silence your enemies. You won't need to fight every critic. Your presence will speak. And the distractions, they'll die quietly, in your shadow,